monarchy, which we know will stand until the end of World War I. Russia at this time is working on their expansion, despite the fact that they do have kind of a mixed, a melting pot, if you will, of different groups within their empire. I always kind of think it's interesting because this shows the creation of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And I don't know if you guys kind of know this, but if you were to actually go on the railroad across Russia, it would take you through 11 different time zones. That's how big this area is. In 1825, we talked about when Nicholas I comes in after the Decembrist uprising, and when he comes in, he really tries to clamp down on any type of revolutions and kind of, in some regards, he tries to put in some reforms, but for the most part, he really pushes for there to be very few liberals in Russia. He does try to reform the army and navy and police force and really revamps some of the judicial code that was in place, makes it a little bit more like the Napoleonic Code, and he tries to increase some people's participation in government, but for the most part, a lot of those things aren't going to really play out, and he's really focused on building up Russian nationalism. Alexander II comes in 1855, and he tended to be fairly liberal, at least in different beliefs that he had. Many people actually tried to assassinate him, and he's finally killed by an angry Polish person who threw a grenade at his carriage. So that's a bit of a bummer. The reason why the Polish were supposedly upset with him is that he had suppressed Polish nationalists at various times. He is, unfortunately, the guy who is leading the charge when Russia is defeated in the Crimean War. He does push for the emancipation of Russian serfs between 1861 and 63, but still charged the serfs a high price for land or for their villages if they wanted to try to control them or buy them away. So ultimately, people aren't really getting freed from various forms of serfdom. Another side thing that they try to do with serfdom is that as a village, you could try to come together and collectively try to buy control of your village away, but it was pretty much impossible to afford that. So many people were still tied to their village, even though you supposedly had emancipation of serfs. By 1881, you get Alexander III coming in. He tends to be very reactionary. He's a Slavophile, which of course means that he is into all things Russian, which leads us to the Russification program, in which he said that only Russian could be spoken in Russian schools. You undoubtedly have the built-up of Russian nationalism at this time. He wanted to strengthen the Eastern Orthodox Church, which was a very Russian entity. This is when Russian Jews are kind of rounded up and forced into this area known as the Pale, which you'll see on the next map. And he outlaws really languages other than Russian for the most part to kind of be encouraged, certainly in the schools, but he's even really not wanting to hear it, certainly at his court and at other functions. He does secure and strengthen really the autocratic power of his position, and you get, whereas you had kind of a sense of liberalism with Alexander II, you kind of have a turning back to more conservative nature with Alexander III. And so on this slide, if you guys look to the left by Warsaw and Kiev and Odessa, you see the Pale, where a lot of Russian Jews are forced to move. Unfortunately, this is going to leave a rather large population of Jewish people right in the wake of advancing Nazi forces as we get into World War II, which is why you have such huge losses in this area. And as you guys know, this area, of course, becomes Poland eventually as well. And what's going on with the Ottoman Empire toward the end of the 1800s, they're kind of referred to as the sicker man of Europe. Austria and Hungary administered part of this region, politically speaking. Russia wanted lands along the Black Sea so they could have access to the Mediterranean, and you do get an increase in nationalism in this region from the various groups that live there, which unfortunately also leads to an increase in violence. And as I've already said, they are certainly on the way out at the end of the 1800s. So this PowerPoint covers quite a variety of different things going on, but it should hopefully correspond nicely with what you've read in your textbook. And by all means, if anything's confusing, please ask questions when we meet again, and then be sure to be looking at your study guide book as kind of a side thing.